Alright guys, it's finally time for it. It's time for basically the last boss of the tier. I think I think Nefarian's a bit harder than Sinestra, honestly. Even though Sinestra's like the heroic only boss, I definitely think Nefarian's gonna be a little bit tougher for most guilds. This is a video of, I think, our second kill. There's a lot of different ways to do this fight. Timing when you send your crackles, how many people you send to how many pillars, you know, how you spread out your tanks and stuff like that, how you kite the ads. I'm not going to talk about every single way to do the fight. I'm just going to talk about the way that we do it. This is going to be from the perspective of me as Disc Priest, and also from the perspective of me kiting the ads with the tank. Honestly, I think it's the most useful perspective because I think the raid healing perspective is really not as interesting. It's like the simplest role, right? You just heal up the crackles and use your CDs. The main things you have to worry about on this fight, not getting one shot to crackles, being able to effectively heal through the damage on the pillars, especially if you're pushing crackles on the pillars, and just having all your healers positioned correctly, following their assigned tanks and doing the actual job they're assigned to do. It can be kind of hard to wrangle people to actually heal tanks on this fight. People really want to heal the crackle up just because it's the most like HPS and you get to burst and stuff, but you know, if you assign a healer to a tank, they should be following that tank the whole time and never letting them die. And once you get that worked out and get people on their assignments full time, the fight gets a lot easier. So we 6 heal this fight. I would recommend just 6 healing it, especially if you're on progression and you have access to 6 healers. Doesn't really matter what healers they are, 6 of any spec, any combination really works fine. You want to have at least one Holy Paladin and at least one Disc Priest. Other than that, pretty much any healer can do this effectively. So let's get into it.
Keep them up pretty easy.
Pre-pull, I'm just doing the normal like pre-shielding stuff for discipline. Pretty useful here too because there's going to be a big burst of raid damage like pretty quick into the fight with usually the raid will get like tail swiped at least once, at least the way we do it. So it's just good to do, to have some pre-shields up, pre-hots, stuff like that. Mostly important for discipline, right? Because you can get the most value out of that Aegis. Actually, before that, I'm going to go over the specs for this fight because I think it's actually pretty important. So for me personally, I would be using a spec that takes Inner Sanctum here. Depending on which type of healing you're going to be doing, you'll swap your points around a little bit as discipline. So you'd get like the standard stuff here. So this is... So this is the build that I would be using if you're a Discipline Priest and you're going to be mostly tank healing following the ad tank around. You want Inspiration and you want Inner Sanctum for the Crackles. As a Priest, you have very low DR, you have no defensive CDs, so unless you always have a powered shield on yourself for each Crackle, which you can do, but it, it requires a global. Sometimes things go wrong and you don't, it's just much safer to have this 6% DR. So this is the build I would use if you're following the tank around. If you're not following the tank around, you can get some points in darkness, maybe drop inspiration. Yeah, you might want to use something like this. Something like that. I would still try to grab inspiration. It's just, there's a decent amount of tank damage, and if you can send like a penance or a palm or anything like that into the ad tank as they're in range of you, keeping that inspiration up is good, although you can also just drop it for more throughput if you want. But again, I would have a build with Inner Sanctum for this fight specifically, especially if you're progging and you're just having a little bit of difficulty living those crackles. This is very helpful. 6% doesn't seem like a lot, but it's pretty huge. It's usually the difference between being one shot and not being one shot. Also, gearing, it can be useful to put on gear with a little bit more stamina. So you have higher eye level pieces, if you have some PvP pieces, stuff like that. Just a little bit of extra stamina can really help you live. So that's Priest. Let's look at the talent builds for some of the other healers. So for Shaman, I would always get Ancestral Resolve on this fight, and you can usually just live a crackle by always being casting when it goes out, which is not, that hard to do. You can also get Elemental Warding, but I think this is too much of an investment. I would also always take Stoneclaw Totem for this fight as Shaman. If you put a Stoneclaw down every time there's a crackle, you'll always live. You don't have to spend talent points on this. So also, it can be useful getting Blessing of the Eternals if you're going to be raid healing. If you're going to be following one of the tanks around, just make sure you get like Nature's Blessing and the more single target focused talents. Ancestral Awakening, stuff like that, points and crit. Yeah, so that's Shaman. Let's look at the other healers. For Holy Paladin, you're just going to use your standard build. Holy Paladin is super tanky, and you don't really need to change anything for this really at all. For Holy Priest, I would consider grabbing Inner Sanctum over Darkness here, and I would also get 3 out of 3 in Test of Faith, just because most of the time targets are going to be below 50% health after the crackle, so you're going to get a bunch of healing from that. As a holy piece, you're probably just going to be raid healing, so yeah, I would take this. Although this losing this 3% haste can mess up your like breakpoints on renew, which is kind of annoying, but I think it's still just worth, because you're a priest, so you're super squishy. I wouldn't take blessed resilience. I just don't think this is a very good defensive option at all. For druid, you can grab points in perseverance, but I personally wouldn't. You have bark skin for like every other crackle. And if you are really in danger, you can always just go bear form to get a little bit of HP bonus. I feel like you're not really going to get one shot as a druid, so I wouldn't worry too much about dropping points in throughput for perseverance personally, although you can if you really are having trouble. All right, so now that we've talked about specs, let's get into the VOD. So first phase here, it kind of depends how you play it with how many crackles you push. Basically, as you jump down, you're going to have the whole raid be on Oni for a little while, and then Nef's going to come down. He's going to be tanked away from Oni. If they're too close, they like will fuck you up, so gotta keep them apart. And then when you kill Oni is when you go into like the pillar phase. So until that happens, you're gonna have like your we 3-tank this, so we have like 1 tank with the ads, 1 tank on Oni, and 1 tank on Nef. You just have to have a healer assigned to each tank, and then the rest of the healers are just going to be in the stack raid healing. So nothing too complicated here at the beginning, just POHing. This is when you can just kind of spin your wheels, doing a little bit of healing into the Oni tank. And you'll see she'll put down these like little swirlies, just like don't be in those. They're pretty easy to avoid. These ads, try not to get any threat on these, just let the tank that's picking up these ads get threat on them and pull them out. So you can see we have our prop paladin on these ads, and I'm going to go follow him out. Thing to mention, if you're the tank on these ads, I like to be close enough to bounce palm for the most part. This is a little bit far, I think. I like to be close as priest, especially in this first phase. You don't really need to ever be gripping the tank on this phase, so you don't have to be like positioned in a way that you can grip them out of being meleeed in an emergency. So if you're out here with the tank, you will be getting hit sometimes by the like electrocute out of the side of Oni. And when that happens, you just have to, put a shield on yourself, put a shield on the tank, and just crank some binding heals. As a priest out here, you're going to be doing a lot of binding healing, and a lot of, penance. You can send some atonement into these ads. The problem is, like, what we do here is we use you can see that ring. This is like super nice to just give like 8-9 seconds of time not being damaged on these ads. So if you're using a ring to control these, you can't really atonement, right? Because if you atonement and you hit them, you can knock them out of that ring. But they don't do too much damage in this first phase. And once these die in the first phase, you can safely just go back to the stack. I go to the raid that's on Nefarian right now. The other thing to mention here is these mind controls. When they're mind controlled, they can't take healing, but they also don't take damage from crackle. So if you're in the mind control and a crackle's about to go out, it's usually best to get some stacks and just stay in the MC and take no damage. You can see here, now that the crackle goes out, we just do some POHing. If you get MC'd as a healer, unless you're in like a really dangerous spot where like maybe you're the one tank that's out, or the one healer that's out like healing the tank on Oni or healing the ad tank, in that case you usually just have to instantly cancel, because if you don't heal, the tank will fall over. If you're in the stack raid healing, you can try to get as many MC stacks as possible. It's really, really good. Just helps you heal super hard. It gives it, you can snapshot things, like you can snapshot Lightwell, Hots, or Shield, stuff like that. So really, really useful to get some stacks of that mind control. The way we play this is we kill Oni, and then right as we push a crackle, you don't have to do this. This is like a little bit of a tight timing window thing. You can just kind of kill Oni and go to the pillars, but that's what we do. So yeah, you see we get a crackle here. The crackle is going to come out, and then we're going to kill Oni. The crackle goes out right away. We mass heal the whole raid with a spirit link, and then we go to our pillars. So this is like a kind of a tight timing window strategy here. You don't have to push this crackle this way. You can just kill Oni, but this is how we do it. Phase 1, not too hard. It's mostly just not having your ad tank die, and not having the tank that's like away from the raid die, and there's a little bit of raid healing from those crackles. Now, the way that we do pillars is we have like half the raid on one pillar, half the raid on another, and then just a tank and a healer basically, and I'm like one other kick on the third pillar. We kill the 2 adds that are on the pillars with the whole like halves of the raid on them super as quickly as we can. We do not push any crackles. We just kill the adds ASAP, and then once the 2 adds are dead and we are out of the pillar phase, we just go kill the third add super quick. So you'll see here, I believe it's just me and the Resto Shaman healing this pillar. Very important as a priest to have your group set up. Again, my groups are not like optimally set up here to heal, but we have this one group with the hunters and the rogues and stuff set up, so you can, like, I have like one group that's sufficient for POH. These other 5 people I can just heal with like binding heal and palm and penance and stuff. So again, just try to have your group set up super well for healing this pillar phase. You can see here just getting some passive damage from the boss shooting fireballs, and then you obviously need to get kicks on this. One thing to mention, if you are a Resto Druid, an HPAL, or a Resto Shaman, you can help with kicks on these adds. If the add gets a cast off, it's basically a wipe. It's super easy to just kick, right? So something you can do as a healer to save your pull. The other mechanic here is these cinders. You'll see it's marked on my raid frames here. The person that gets this just has to jump off and swim a little bit out into the lava so they don't knock the whole raid off the pillar. Pretty simple. One thing to mention here is you don't actually have to jump off right away. You can wait a couple seconds to mitigate the amount of damage you take from the magma. And also, if somebody's like in danger out there, you can always grip them back onto the pillar just to save them a little bit of damage while they swim. You do get like a stacking fire debuff that does damage. Palm is really good here. POH is really good here. All your stacked up raid heals like F-Flow, Healing Rain, your Healing Word from Holy Priest, all that kind of stuff. Those are very effective because obviously everyone's in this super tight stack on the pillar. So just use those liberally. So you can see there I just gripped the guy back on after he popped. Don't grip early though, because you can grip them back and blow up and knock everybody off. You can see here we killed the adds on these 2 platforms, and we're just going to run over to the third and kill it as quickly as possible before we swap to the boss. You can see Nef is at 61%, so we have 6 more crackles to go. We tank Nef like at the edge of the arena over here and just turn him, and then of course I'm going to be going out there with the prop paladin. The way we do this is we have our third tank like basically stack with the main off tank that's taking the adds, and take a couple of them just to split damage a little bit. This is really nice if you have a priest out here healing, because you can bounce palm between the 2 tanks. Although, if we were like speed killing, we'd have this with this bear just being cat doing damage to the boss. It just makes it a little bit easier and gives you a little bit of leeway here. If you have a prot warrior, they're the best ones at doing these adds. I think we did have on our first kill a prot warrior, but we just had like a little different comp this week, so you can do it with any tank. Prot Pally is nice because they have their like Holy Wrath to stun, which is like pretty low cooldown. So for this phase, we're basically just going to be backpedaling all the way around the room, dodging like fire and breath and stuff like that. You can see here I get MC'd, and this is like pretty dangerous here. I think the tank might actually die from this. I probably should have just broken this insta, but I was a little bit greedy and wanted to get stacks. So I get 11%. And then I do heal him right back up. So this is a good opportunity to, you see I popped a renew on him there. That just like snapshots the increased healing. I'm doing a little bit of atonement here. We don't really use like rings as much in this like third phase. It's mostly just backpedaling around the room, just kind of tanking them, face tanking them until they get more stacks. So you can safely atonement into these just to be like mana efficient. You can also see here, I have an Arsham that's going to come out and do a little bit of healing. You can probably solo this, but it's just safer, especially if you're 6 healing, to have 2 healers out here. You can see I'm trying to position myself that I can grip him backwards if it's an emergency. And the big thing to mention here is just you have to be really careful when crackles come out, because it's not just you that gets a big burst of damage, it's also the tank. So when the next crackle comes out, so it's coming out here. You'll see what I do is I have a shield on myself. I try to get a fresh shield on the tank. And then most of the time I'll try to cast a binding heal so that it hits instantly when the crackle goes out. Yeah, so you can see I'm binding healing the tanks up there. It just gives you a little bit of safety. And you can see the Arsham coming out is messing up with my palm bouncing between the tanks. So you got my palm and it's just sitting there. So that palm is like really, really nice to get a lot of healing on those tanks for very, very mana efficiently. Although it's pretty hard to go out here if you're playing correctly. I don't even think I use my Him Fiend. I think I save it and then I just end up not needing it. So if you're mana efficient out here, it's not too hard not to go just healing the tanks up, especially if the tanks are like using their stuns and cooldowns and stuff liberally. You can see there I PS'd that Crackle, just because the ads are getting a decent amount of stacks here, and you know, it's just good to use a cooldown for each Crackle if you have one available. So while I'm out here, just, you know, running around with the tanks, you can see the entire rest of the raid is just stacked up. If you're healing in this part of the raid, the stack, you just basically blast healing into the Crackle to make sure the raid's topped before the next Crackle, and just do a little bit of healing into the tank. If you get MC'd and you're in the stack raid healing, try to get as many stacks of the buff as possible. Don't break it instantly. The only healers who really have to worry about breaking it instantly are the healers that are out with the ad tank, in my opinion. Just because you're going to have enough healers in that stack that if one gets MC'd, the other 2 or 3 can take up the slack. And getting that buff is like absolutely huge. As you can see here, me and the tank are low, so I'm going to be binding healing and shielding myself, and then sending a couple of binding heals. Binding heal is really, really, really useful in this part of the fight. You can see we also just link that Crackle to prevent the tank from getting one shot. It's really good to just use your cooldowns liberally out here, because if at any point this ad tank dies, it can be kind of bad. So I think he does actually die because I get, yeah, me and the other healer both get tail swiped here. This is just bad positioning on our part. And then the tank does die, so they go to the backup tank. This is why it's nice to have like 2 tanks out there if you're 3 tanking. Just gives you a little bit of leeway to make mistakes. And you'll see what I do here is I Him, not only to top the 2 tanks, that one that just got B-resed, but also just to help topping the raid with that Crackle. And then once this Him is over, I believe I boots. Yeah, I boots out, and I get into a position here, and I grip the ad tank away. So I get him into position, and also just to prevent some damage. We're getting a Crackle here, so I barrier myself in the tank. So again, just send those cooldowns liberally. You shouldn't really need that many cooldowns for the actual raid stack, especially with the gear levels now. People just have enough HP to live Crackle, especially if they're not like playing dumb and they're using their personals, and you know you're using your AMZs, stuff like that. You shouldn't really be worrying too much about Crackles. At this point, the ads have 15 stacks, so they're really, really slapping the tank. He does kind of LOS me a little too hard here. He should have been moving a little bit slower in this part, I think. But again, not too big of a deal. The boss is about to die, so yeah, not too big of a deal here. Just have to move forward a little bit to get LOS. And you can see there he was bootsing away from the ads. So yeah, the boss dies. So again, not really too complicated. The most difficult part of this fight is going to be wrangling your healers to get them to actually just follow their assigned tank the whole time and never let them die. You know, there's sort of a global taunt thing going on where like whenever healers see big raid damage, they just want to go heal it, and you have to resist that temptation. So once you get that figured out, once you get kicks on the pillars figured out, which is not really your job as a healer, but you can contribute to it, and once you have, you know, your Crackle cooldowns and stuff figured out, this fight's really not that difficult. It is sort of a tank healer fight. Get those assignments worked out in your group and stick to them. So that's Nefarian. Pretty complicated fight. I think it's like, you know, it's sort of the tiers like Lich King. It's a little bit easier than Lich King 0%, but I think it is the hardest fight, all things considered, in the tier. A little bit harder than Sinestra. So good luck on your prog.